To literacy.
Literacy.
Yeah, that's you, isn't it?
Yep, last year. They still won.
Look at them. Souvenir history. To make people think they left some mark on the world. Because otherwise, nobody would ever know. I never want to end up on that wall.
Have no fear, you never will.
What's he doing here?
Since you didn't stop by earlier, I just hope to give you this.
Maybe he didn't want to see you.
I think he can speak for himself.
Well, for starters, the scene opens with lively jazz music to represent the era, while also representing the cheery mood. This creates a greater shift when the mood later changes to an intense one. In this scene, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, and Jack Kerouac and Lucien Carr have just pulled off a late-night prank on the college library to promote their new poetry movement, despite almost being caught. The wall in this scene represents everything Lucien does not want to be. His worst fear, being remembered briefly and then forgotten, which is why Lucien states he never wants to end up on that wall and refers to it as souvenir history, which is when people believe that they're being remembered because their picture is on that wall. This is ironic because, as shown at the end of the movie, Lucien ends up on the wall and then history forgets him and remembers his friends, particularly Allen Ginsberg, to which Lucien was the most cruel.
Yep. He says that we should all have him around.
You've had plenty of time to celebrate. Your library hijinks made the morning paper. I'm sure you're all very proud.
How do you know it was us?
Did he use that Bastille line? Because I gave it to him.
I haven't seen you for days.
You left this at my place.
You told the guards we were there. Nobody else knew.
You wanted me to get kicked out. You ratted on me.
Stop, Lou. You're losing control. You know what comes next. I know what comes next.
Yeah. Cut him off.
Best of luck, janitor.
Excuse me?
We are over. Leave.
When Michael C. Hall's character, David Cameron, arrives, there is an immediate tone shift. David's character represents somewhat of a misguided guardian angel to Lucien. Additionally, the essay written for Lucien represents all the work David puts into his relationship to Lucien and his need to be around him. When Lucien crumples it up and puts it in his whiskey, it represents a change in him, even if he is showing off for his friends. The essay represents his old life, and the alcohol represents adulthood. The whole action represents Lucien's loss of innocence as he transitioned to adulthood in a world of drugs and alcohol by cutting off ties with the man whose misguided actions have kept him grounded. But that's not all. The red scarf that Lucien left at David's house has much more to it than meets the eye. Keep in mind, this is 1944, so openly discussing your homosexuality endeavors in a crowded bar is rather frowned upon. Notice that the scarf is red. In Shakespearean times, a red cloth represented death. The red cloth in this scene could represent David's death later in the movie, which, spoiler alert, he's murdered by Lucien. It could also represent Lucien's loss of innocence.
Look at me, Lou. You said I was everything to you. You are everything to me. Everything to me, do you hear me?
Let's go.
Please, Lou, please.
David, time and place.
Shut up, traitor. dead if it weren't for me.
You'd be boring if it weren't for me.
You can obviously see in this scene that David's tactics change, and so does the music. He goes from an aggressive you owe me attitude to a loving and pleading one. The music goes from a jazzy upbeat song to a love ballad. Additionally, this whole section has a huge amount of irony and foreshadowing. When David says, "You'd be dead if it weren't for me," it's incredibly ironic, because Lucian kills him later. Also, Lucian is so obsessed with being remembered for his impact, but up until this point, someone else has done all the work for him. And the person doing the work is literally working as a completely overqualified janitor, preventing himself from ever being remembered. It's strange and ironic that Lucian trusts him. Lucian says, "You'd be boring if it weren't for me," showcasing that Lucian is only interested in his legacy rather than his own mortality.